Hello and welcome to my talk with the title There are more pronouns than my workbook says, how we can engage with new pronouns outside of the classroom. The slides are going to be in German, but I'm going to talk in English so that you will be able to follow this talk if you understand English or German. Yes, my contact information is here in the corner. First of all, about me. You can use she, her pronouns for me. I'm studying Romance linguistics right now in a master's program with the focus on syntax and grammar. And I'm supporting people to write their text more inclusive and to use inclusive language in their language learning. And I support people learning different languages as well. I was raised with German and Low Saxon, but I only speak German from my childhood on, and I've learned English and Spanish in school and at university. I've started to learn Portuguese at university and learned it more and more when I stayed for a time in Portugal and with speaking to friends also nowadays. And I've learned several other languages in between those times at university, at school, with friends. So today I'm going to talk about neopronouns. And for me personally, the most important questions are how can we use neopronouns for our language learning material? How can we include this in our language learning? And how can we act against a data bias in language science and linguistics and this stuff. So what I'm going to talk about today, the content, what are neopronouns, some examples, challenges for language learners, how to get into contact with people using neopronouns, some differences between languages and what you can do, and some prospects and links. What are neopronouns? So when we speak about neopronouns in German and in English, we focus on the third person singular personal pronouns the one that we learn in school or that are written in grammars and taught in many language classes are in German sies and in English he, she, it in general. But when we talk about neopronouns, we speak about other pronouns that exist in addition to those that we are taught already in schools or grammars. This system that we are taught or that are explained in most books is often a very binary system where there are only two possibilities to speak about people. There are some exceptions. For example, in German, "es" can be used for certain people because of some grammar explanation. For example, Mädchen, girl, which gets the das Mädchen form, which is like people could use "es" as a pronoun for a girl, even though we would use "sie" in general language when we talk about this person in traditional grammar, at least. In reality, there are more pronouns and people use more pronouns than this. So what I just said was what traditional grammar is teaching us, but in reality there was more in this space. So for example, in English, which is quite popular right now, or also already since some time, is the third person singular they, which can be used to speak or to refer to people that are where we don't know which pronoun they use, but also to speak about people that use they as their pronoun. And except they in English, there are more pronouns, and those are in general called neopronouns. We have them in English and German and quite other languages. I will concentrate here mostly on German neopronouns, but I will also give some examples of English. And you can check on the internet for other neopronouns in other languages. So for what are they used? Mostly neopronouns are used for the expression of identity, gender, to support queer people, or to test which pronouns are good for oneself, to evade the binary boxes that are taught in traditional grammars and traditional school settings, for example, and for several other reasons. That means that we often find neopronouns used in context with queer people or with trans people, with non-binary people, but this doesn't mean that a person that uses neopronouns for themselves or for another person is trans themselves or non-binary, because the use of pronouns and the gender of a person don't. If a person uses neopronouns we don't know, or a certain set of pronouns, we can't know what's their gender, or if they are trans or cis or non-binary or inter or agender or something like that, uses a label like that. But still there are high chances that we get in touch with neopronouns in certain settings. Some examples. The first links you can see here at the top are some lists for neopronouns, and the German one has also some examples. You can see the list and how different the neopronouns works in both languages, so that you see. I will show you just a few examples here. For example, the German which also exists in English. But there are way more neopronouns, and every person, there are different people use different neopronouns and build their own neopronouns. So it's not like there is just a set of 5 neopronouns and that's it, but there are lots and lots of neopronouns, and you can find different lists on different websites and blogs and in research. This is just to give you an example how it works in general, and you can find in the resources other neopronouns. So for example, for the German one, I have here some example sentences. This just shows us, we have here someone called Alex, and this person uses pronouns. And then we have these examples that show us how the name of the person and then how the pronoun works at different positions in the phrase, in the sentences. Here, for example, möchte später Arzt werden in the subject position, and then when we want to this this sentence, ich frage ob M's Hund einsperren kann. Wegen M's Hundes muss ich die ganze Zeit niesen. Then you see the pronoun in different other positions in the sentence, so that you know in different grammatical contexts there are different forms from this neopronoun. This example is a easy one to learn, because these four forms are pretty similar, and there are other examples where every form gets another word, another pronoun, so that it gets more difficult to learn different forms. But this is just to show there are neopronouns that are easy to learn. And here's an example of the English one, where you can also see that at different positions there are different forms, and these websites that giving this list often show examples so that we can learn when we want to learn a language and learn new pronouns in that language, how to use the pronoun in different positions because of grammatical reasons of that language, of the structure of a language. A pronoun has different forms at different positions, so that we can learn all these forms with examples, so that it gets easier to learn these forms also when we want to learn a language, or also when we want to learn these forms in our own language. So some challenges for the language learners. First of all, we need to get material to find those forms and to get to know forms for neopronouns. And then we need to decide which forms do we want to learn, which forms do we need, and then how do I train using those forms, how I get used to use those forms. And then we need to think about when can we use those forms and how do we get into contact with people using those forms. So first of all, the material. I gave you already some links. In general, depending on the language that you're learning and the language in which you want to learn the neopronouns, it's often a good idea to look at personal blogs, Twitter accounts, and Tumblr pages from people that are using neopronouns. On Twitter, for example, you can follow queer communities and then look in the comments and look for queer people, for example, that, or people in general that have in their bio listed some neopronouns. When you follow them, you often get into touch with some content using neopronouns and with other people using neopronouns, so that you can get into bubbles where you can learn using stuff and also reading stuff with neopronouns. And if you want to work more intensive with this within this topic, you can also look in current research about neopronouns in different languages. As for example, the conference Lavender Languages and Linguistics, where people show their research on neopronouns, or also on other topics around linguistics and queerness and languages in general, so that you can get in touch with people doing research on those topics and also see what research is doing right now and which forms does research find, for example. About the forms, which forms do we want to use or which forms do we want to learn, that's highly dependent on your own aims for clearly. So when you want to learn a language, it's always the most important part. What do you want to learn? So when you ask yourself, okay, I want to get in touch with neopronouns, but which neopronouns are important for me? Which do I need to learn? Because there are lists of hundreds and hundreds of neopronouns in a language, for example. It's important to see, okay, which neopronouns do you want to use? For yourself maybe, or for people in your surroundings, which neopronouns do they use for themselves? Which neopronouns do you need to learn to speak about people that you want to speak about or that are in your surroundings, which are important for yourself? And if you don't know which forms you need, because maybe you aren't in touch with lots of people using neopronouns for themselves, you can always look at these lists and look, okay, which are the most popular, which forms are the ones that the person or the people in general use most of the times. And then you can just start with those, or for example with those with less forms, like the M one that I showed you, so that you can start with little things and learn the first forms and then build on that. Some more challenges. So how do we train using new pronouns? There's a great blog article about it in English from Kirby Conrad that I linked here, about how to use pronouns in general and how to stop messing up pronouns. That's the title. So in general, you can train on yourself by writing stories, for example, or write short introduction text about the person. When you sit in a language class in the beginning, for example, you often have those, "Hi, I'm so, a name. My name, my name is. I'm so and so years old," and then you learn after that. This is Tom. They are great. They are 15 years old, and with these kind of introduction texts that you use in language classes in general, where maybe the language teachers use only the traditional grammar pronouns, you can also use those type of texts or those type of exercises to use new pronouns. Yes. You can also always look for other people that want to learn certain sets of neopronouns and just try to speak to them and speak about other people and try to use as much neopronouns as possible. You can also find for certain languages, there are programs online where you fill in blanks and you just put in some pronouns that you want to train, and then the program gives you blanks and you just put it in. That's more or less the same with programs that are training other kinds of language, but here there's certain material that already uses or trains with you new pronouns. And you can also read texts and stories from people that are using new pronouns already. I have here one link to an author using new pronouns in their stories. Train yourself reading texts and stories about people with new pronouns so that you get used to it. Then the next challenge, when can I use from certain neopronouns? Because every person decides for themselves which are their pronouns. You can use neopronouns always for yourself, of course, and also for fictional characters, and for people that use those neopronouns for themselves. So it's not okay to use a certain set of neopronouns for someone who says, yeah, my pronoun is she, her, for example, or he, him. But when someone says, okay, my pronouns are, for example, you can use for this person that set of new pronouns. Then another question, how do we get into contact with people using neopronouns? The best way that I see is get into contact with queer communities and other queer people online or offline. For online, I would recommend Twitter or Tumblr, or finding weird Twitter or Tumblr personal blogs where people, or in general on social media, people often give their pronouns in their bio, and there are lots of people who regularly post about pronouns or their own pronouns or write with other people about pronouns. There are special points when you get into contact with people using neopronouns. That's a little bit, that depends on how much you are already in contact with queer communities, or if you're part of queer communities yourself. It's important to recognize that we can't expect from people to speak about topics or to explain us stuff just because we are asking about it. People have other stuff to do, and also often people who are publicly speaking about neopronouns or publicly using neopronouns are also getting attacked publicly, so, or also in private. So it's not always safe for people to speak about it, and it's not always safe for people to speak with certain people they don't know about it. So it's important to recognize this, and I would recommend to just have a look who already speaks about it publicly or who writes about it publicly, and to first of all read that stuff and see what is already offered online or offline at events or in written forms, blogs or something like that, and then to start from that point and just do it step by step. There are a lot of people who use neopronouns for themselves or for people in their surroundings that are using them especially in safe spaces, so, or in contexts where they feel safe. So when you, for example, try to engage in an interview, or you want to do a questionnaire for some kind of linguistics research or for whatever reason, it can depend how a person answers to you, if they feel you're safe for them to speak about it openly or not. So it's very important to recognize this and to make sure that the person feels safe to speak about it openly, and that we still cannot expect people to tell us everything. If you want to engage in neopronouns and other stuff around language in queer communities or gender neutral language for research or for teaching, maybe because you help other people to learn languages, there are resources for scientists and also for language teachers from queer communities themselves, which explain or which have like model tests or model material that you can use to build your material or your resources sensitively, so that you can build a safe environment to work with these kind of language and communities using this language or neopronouns, for example. About differences in different languages, I talked about English and German, and the main difference that I see between those both languages is that German has more different forms, like the nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative forms, with different endings, and also possessive and relative pronouns that have more different forms depending on the language context in comparison to English. But then there are other languages that work differently as well. So depending on the grammar and the language family or language group of a language, when we want to use neopronouns, we have to look for different properties of the language and the grammar of a language. I have here some examples of Portuguese, Spanish, and French. I use just the most common that I know. Of course, there are way more neopronouns in all those languages as well. Those are just examples. And here it's often just the change of small parts of the pronoun to make it gender neutral or to make another pronoun out of it. At least in those examples that I gave here, in Portuguese, ele, ela to elu, in Spanish, ella to ella, and in French, from il, elle to yel. Yel is also already recognized in French in certain official dictionaries, which is a huge talking point, or was a huge talking point at the moment when that happened. So here we can see sometimes it's just changing a certain part of a pronoun. Of course, also in those languages, there are also other neopronouns that change completely. This is just one example. And then we have also languages where traditional grammars don't assign gender so much to the third person singular, but maybe to the first person singular or to another part of the language, so that it's not always the third person singular that changes for neopronouns, but also other parts of language or other certain pronouns. That highly depends on the grammar of the language that you're learning. So a question that I have here now at the end is, do you have examples of languages where another part of language is changed for the topic of neopronouns, or around gender sensitive language or gender neutral language? To keep in mind, even though I say gender sensitive and gender neutral language, that you can't see just because of a person using a certain set of neopronouns, you can't know their gender at that point. And also, what I didn't say yet, you can read about that also in the blog of Kirby Conrad, that depending on the context, when a person is speaking, or in the context, in the setting, a person could use different sets of pronouns. So it can be that a person uses at school she, her pronouns, and later at work, at a bar, or no, okay, yeah, but later at the workplace they use like they, them pronouns, and in their community with friends, and they could use, for example, am pronouns. So it also could depend on the setting. Not for everybody. There are also, of course, people that using the same set of pronouns in all contexts. But you cannot know if just because a person uses a special set of pronouns in one context, that they are using these pronouns also in all other contexts. So yeah. For the future, on Sunday I will give a workshop writing stories with neopronouns in German and English. And you can find that in the program when you search for neopronouns or you look for Sunday. I will give a short introduction, a really small short introduction about neopronouns and story writing, and then we will write our own stories and use neopronouns. And you can come and you write stories in every other language than German and English, but I will focus on those both languages. And you're welcome to join us. We will do it on Zoom. Like I said, you will find it in the program. So this way we can engage in using neopronouns for real and not just talking about it. And I want to thank you that you're here and for joining. And you can contact me with my email that I wrote here. And you can also contact me via social media. I kind of use all kind of social media except TikTok. And here are the links. If you want to get in touch with other kinds of resources, you can also contact me. I have lots of other links and also scientific resources about these topics, so that you can get more stuff about neopronouns. Thank you very much. Okay, so the questions that I found for now are all, no, not all. There are two in German. Okay, the first question, I will read it in German first and then say it in English again. Wie übersetzt man am besten Neopronomen von einer Person, der die Sprache, die man kennt, der die Sprache nicht spricht? So, yeah, that's a hard one. I try to use, for example, I have friends in other countries where I know which pronouns they use in English. So I try to use those neopronouns in German as well. Sometimes people also say, okay, in English, I want to use this set of pronouns, but in German, I want to use this set of pronouns. So sometimes also people differ between that. And then I tend to, okay, then of course we know, okay, I need to use that set of pronouns, that language, but in the other one, of course. But if we only know one set and it seems like it, and we don't have the possibility to ask, I would use the same set and try to use it in the other language. It's often also nice to ask them, okay, I want to speak about you in German. What do you think is okay? So, depending on how familiar you are with the person, it's a good idea to ask them. But if that's not possible, or if that's weird to ask them because you're not so familiar with that person, try to use the pronouns they use in another language and try to use that in your language or in the language that you're talking about. And sometimes it can be helpful to use a set of pronouns. Yeah, no, I would say that. So the second question, würde es nicht mehr Sinn machen, vor allem für Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund, weniger Pronomen zu haben als mehr? So the question is, wouldn't it make more sense, for example, for people with, I don't know how to translate that word, great. So wouldn't it make more sense to have less pronouns than more pronouns, especially for people? I think, I mean, for language learners, it's always easier to have less pronouns, of course. But we also have people that are language learners that want to use for themselves different kinds of pronouns or neopronouns. And I know people that came to Germany and didn't know a word of German, but one of the first things that they asked were, yeah, but how do I use this set of neopronouns in your language? Because I need this to talk about myself. So, yeah, of course, if there is like an academy of language stuff that wants to tell people how to use language, that would make sense for this. But I like to don't tell people how to use language, and if it's more inclusive or more sensitive to let people talk about themselves, how they want to talk about themselves. It's not my job to tell them, no, you're not allowed to use this, because that's kind of yeah, that's not supportive for those people. So I don't want to tell people how to use language, but I want to tell people when they want to use a certain kind of language, for example, if they want to learn new pronouns, how they can get the access to the stuff and how to train using new pronouns and how to use the language that they want to use. And the last question, we have looked mostly at English and German today. Are there other examples from other Romance languages, specifically Spanish, please? Of course, yeah. Spanish there was lots of research also on Spanish and also non-academical texts about Spanish. You can send me an email and I can give you more examples for Spanish. And you can also just Google lenguaje no binario. And yeah, you can Google that, or you know, that's no binario because neopronouns are often, when people write about them, it's often in the context of non-binary people. But you can also Google neopronombres or something like that, and you should find stuff about it. And like I said, you can also contact me and can give you some resources or links to other people. So there are some minutes left, so I will answer the first questions also in German again, because I'm not sure if the people asking them prefer also a question in German. Wie übersetzt man am besten Neopronomen von einer Person, der nicht kennt, die Sprache man spricht? Da würde ich halt empfehlen, dass wir die Neopronomen, die wir wissen, dass die Person die verwendet in einer anderen Sprache, wenn wir nichts anderes darüber wissen, dass wir die versuchen, in die Sprache, in der wir jetzt über die Person sprechen wollen, eben versuchen, da die Form in der Sprache zu verwenden. Teilweise sagen Leute auch: „Okay, in Englisch möchte ich dieses Set of Pronomen verwenden, in der anderen Sprache das andere Set of Pronomen." Dann ist natürlich wichtig, dass wir eben da gucken, okay, wenn die Person in Englisch he oder she verwendet, dass wir das dann eben verwenden, und wenn die Person auf Deutsch aber gerne am zum Beispiel verwendet, dass wir das dann eben da verwenden. Je nachdem, wie gut wir im Kontakt mit der Person sind, kann es auch hilfreich sein, die Person zu fragen, so: „Okay, ich sehe, du verwendest die und die Pronomen auf Englisch zum Beispiel. Ist es okay, wenn ich das auch auf Deutsch verwende, oder möchtest du, dass ich auf Deutsch was anderes verwende?" Wenn die Person zum Beispiel Deutsch kann, oder dass man fragt: „Okay, ich weiß, du kannst Deutsch. Welches Pronomen verwendest du da zum Beispiel?" Es gibt aber häufig Kontexte, in denen es nicht unbedingt angebracht ist, 'ne Person da direkt anzusprechen. Ähm Genau. Aber da ist es eben sehr kontextabhängig, was die beste Lösung ist. Ähm, Je nachdem, wie gut man die Person kennt und wie gut das Pronomen auch in 'ne andere Sprache äh, übernommen werden kann, oder ob es da andere Lösungen eher hilfreich sind. Ich möchte da nicht so genau sagen: „Okay, da musst du jetzt das und das machen", weil die Community selber, also viele Personen da unterschiedliche Meinungen zu einigen Sachen haben und ich da halt sagen würde: „Okay, so würde ich es machen." Aber wenn mir jemand widersprechen möchte, sagt es mir auch gerne. Ähm, genau. Die zweite Frage: Würde es nicht mehr Sinn machen, vor allem für Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund, weniger Pronomen zu haben als mehr? Es gibt genug Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund oder Menschen, die Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund können ja genauso Neopronomen verwenden, oder eben auch Personen, die halt grade nach Deutschland zum Beispiel oder in 'n anderes Land gekommen sind, die vielleicht nicht mal ein Wort Deutsch können. Viele Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund können ja sprechen ja Deutsch oder die Sprache ihres Landes einfach. Aber für die Personen, die eine Sprache noch nicht können, wo sie hinkommen und diese Sprache erst lernen müssen, wäre es theoretisch natürlich einfacher, weniger Pronomen lernen zu müssen. Aber es geht hier darum, Material zu geben, wenn man die Neopronomen verwenden möchte. Das heißt, es gibt Menschen mit Migrationshintergrund. Es gibt Menschen, die ähm, in ein Land gerade gekommen sind und die Sprache überhaupt nicht sprechen. Die sagen: „Hey, ich bin neu hier. Ich habe diese Pronomen in meiner Sprache. Wie kann ich das am besten in deiner Sprache machen?" Das sind manchmal auch die ersten Fragen, die die Person stellt, wenn sie an Leute kommt in dem Land. die in der Sprache irgendwie zu tun haben und mit Neopronomen arbeiten. Das heißt, man sieht, es gibt Leute, die das möchten und, ich möchte niemandem vorschreiben: „Okay, du musst jetzt irgendwie 1.000 Neopronomen lernen“, sondern: „Okay, hier sind die Möglichkeiten, wie man Neopronomen lernen kann.“ Und, es ist irgendwie abhängig von den Personen, mit denen man im Umfeld ist, welche Neopronomen für den Alltag sinnvoll sind zu lernen. Und so ist eben, kontextabhängig, was jemand lernen möchte oder lernt. Da ich aber keine Institution bin, die anderen vorschreibt: „Okay, ihr müsst bestimmte Wörter können“, ähm, ja, ist das, nicht mein Ziel zu sagen: „Okay, ich verbiete jetzt Pronomen, weil das einfacher ist für Leute, die Sprache lernen möchten.“ Es geht ja darum, dass Sprache etwas ausdrücken soll. Und wenn Menschen, die etwas ausdrücken möchten, werde ich sie da nicht von abhalten. Okay, so there are, 3 minutes left from on my watch. Are there any more languages, questions or stuff? Um, you can still send a question or some comment on what I just said. In case there are no more questions, um, like I said, you can contact me for more material, or also if you want to get if you want to tell me that something wasn't uh, the way you see it, or if you want to discuss with me the contents, just contact me and I can give you resources. We can discuss stuff. I'm always up for discussion about how to use neopronouns or how to make language more inclusive. So just contact me and we can, if you want to, we can meet on Sunday and do some story writing with neopronouns in German and English. Thank you very much for listening and for your questions. They were great questions. Thank you very much.